Good afternoon, dear friends. It is Tuesday, November 9th, and we are gathered for our weekly Torah, or now we should call it Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim discussion group. We've finished the book of Joshua, and we are presently studying the book of Judges, a book that describes a tumultuous time where the Jewish people had many highs and many lows, but lots of trouble, political, internal, external troubles with their neighbors, and how there is a reoccurring pattern of the Jewish people shaping up, being in a period of wellness and security, then forgetting about the values that are necessary for success in the land of Israel, getting into trouble, a pressure, torment by their neighbors, and then a hero or some leader galvanizing the people, reminding them of their mistakes and restoring the peace. That is, generally speaking, the pattern. There are some shifts in the pattern. Initially, the earlier leaders, we find there was greater miracles, and towards the latter half of the process, there has to be a lot more initiative from the people themselves, and that was certainly the story that we read last week of Yiftach, a leader who was valiant and saved the Jewish people in one sense, but also a terribly flawed in another sense. And the flaw was not only regarding his terrible mistake, dreadful mistake to pledge, to sacrifice that which comes out first, but also because he was involved in a civil war. Granted, the people who were the instigators were the people of Ephraim. They came ready for battle, looking for blood, and they got it not the way they wanted. But there's a subtle criticism that maybe Yiftach could have used some diplomacy to avoid such a devastating result. We are now up to the famous story, or I should say the story of one of the famous biblical characters, and I'm talking about none other than Samson, or in Hebrew, Shimshon. Shimshon is one of those larger-than-life people, the inspiration for some of the superheroes in the comics. As we'll see, he had great might, but also, like everyone, a package deal. There were some disadvantages, he had some handicaps, as well as some flaws that are part of the human condition. And so let us take a look at the screen that I hope is sharing. Lynn, can you see the screen?
Yep, I can see
Okay,
it.
good. Good. Joy, we're currently Judges 13, verse 1.
Thank you.
And the children of Israel continued. This is going to sound like a refrain that you expect almost.
Again.
By the way, we are closer to the end of the book of Judges than the beginning. And so know that there is a pattern that is somewhat prevalent throughout this book. By the time we get to the next book, which is going to be the origin of the Jewish monarchy, we'll see it has a very different flavor and a different style, appropriately representing a different chapter in the Jewish story. So the sons of Israel continue to do evil in the eyes of the Lord. The Lord delivered them in the hand of the Philistines, the Pelishtim, for 40 years. 40 years is a long time. It's a tough time to be in oppression, to be in trouble.
And 40
I'm sorry.
years is a very popular number.
40 years, Lynn, 100%. You are correct. 40 years is an extremely prevalent period of time.
Right.
40 years is like a solid unit of time. I mean, let's think about the United States. 40 years, we're talking about 1980 to 2020 approximately. That's a solid chunk of time. A lot has happened. Now, granted, in those days, they didn't have politics that was in a cycle of 4 years and 2 years. But nonetheless, as we've noticed, leaders seem to come and go. Although your tenure didn't end by being voted out. If you live in these days, your tenure ended with the end of your lifespan, which of course was a considerable distinction. But anyways, back to our story. The Jewish people are making trouble. There was a certain man of Sirah, or Zorah, from the family of the Danites, or Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren, bore not. And so this is another reoccurring theme. And quite frankly, Today, many people contend with infertility. There's a lot of treatments and options if a person is contending with infertility. But in ancient times, there was less medical solutions for infertility. And so it might not come to one as a surprise that it was a common concern. Human beings innately want to pass on their genes. People desire when possible. It's not always possible, but people desire to have children. And so it's a recurring theme in the Bible. And again, the parents of our hero, like Abraham and Isaac and Rachel, struggle, or I should say Sarah and Rebecca and Rachel struggle to have children. There's no shame in that. But this is the story of the people of of Manoah's family. Now, I want to point something out at the outset. There are 12 tribes. The Jewish people are comprised of 12 tribes. Now, although everyone is meant to be equal, there was somewhat of a dynamic between the tribes. And perhaps one of the less celebrated tribes, let's just say that way. They had less heroes, and the tribe of Judah is larger than life. The tribe of Menashe and Ephraim, we've seen a lot of them. And other tribes had their special qualities and role in society. Dan generally seems to have been less remarkable by virtue of the narrative. And that's going to change because our story here revolves all around the tribe of Dan. And not entirely unfamiliar, suddenly an angel of the Lord appears to Mrs. Manoah and says to her, "Behold, now thou art barren and bearest not," right? You are not having children, but thou shalt conceive and bear a son. The angel gives a word that she's going to have a child. Now, here's the question. Lynn, what do you think the angel looked like?
Like angel.
Did the angel look like an angel? What does an angel look like?
It's visible? Are they
So-
visible?
So most probably this angel did not look like an angel.
Yeah.
This angel put on a camouflage. He dressed up like a human
Okay.
because we human beings have a hard time communicating with angels. We do better talking to human beings.
Right. Are angels visible, Rabbi?
Angels, according to Jewish tradition, are not typically visible unless they endeavor to be visible by taking on the appearance of a human.
Okay.
That is generally the understanding of Judaism. So here they get a visit of an angel. It must have been evident this was a special being, but they didn't necessarily realize they were talking to an angel. Now, therefore, beware. The angel says, your baby comes with some fine print. I pray thee, drink neither wine nor strong drink. Don't drink any alcohol and eat nothing that is impure.
Very good advice.
You got to be very mindful of your health
Mm-hmm.
during pregnancy.
Right.
But believe it or not, we're going to take things a step
Right.
further. Because this wasn't simply advice to be mindful of what she eats during pregnancy, which is absolutely essential for healthy pregnancy. But in addition, there are going to be restrictions in the child's lifetime as well, which is rare. As a matter of fact, this does not happen, with the exception of this moment. For thou shalt conceive and bear a son, you're going to have a child, but there are restrictions about the treatment and the lifestyle of this child too. No razor shall come upon his head. No haircuts, no shaving. The child shall be a Nazir to God from the womb. This child should be a Nazirite. There is no proper English equivalent to a Nazir. A Nazir inspires the idea of these monks that live detached from the world, but that is not a fair description of what a Nazir is. A Nazir biblically, and we discussed this in the Bible discussion, the Torah discussions. A Nazir is an individual who is not permitted to drink wine, is not permitted to go into a cemetery, so they are not allowed to drink intoxicants. They are not allowed to go into a cemetery, which in the Jewish ritual story conveys ritual impurity, and they are not allowed to cut their hair. And this is a form of, being removed from the mundane and kind of a type of spirituality. Again, there's no perfect equivalent in modern culture. But I believe certain monks and certain are somewhat inspired by this, but it's not quite the same. So your son has restrictions. No haircuts. He has to be mindful where he goes. He shall be a Nazir to God from the womb. He should be devoted entirely to God from his birth. And he'll begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Plishtim. So imagine you're a Israelite woman, 2,700 years ago, minding your own business, walking around. You have a heavy heart because you want to have a child and you can't. And suddenly you meet a stranger. The stranger seems like a interesting, eccentric, maybe somewhat spiritual, speaks in somewhat of a code and says, my woman, my lady, don't worry. How does the guy know? How does the stranger know she doesn't have children? He knows you're going to have a child. But listen, during pregnancy, you're going to have to be very careful. And when he's born, you're going to have to treat him in a very particular way. And guess what? Your child's going to be the hero. He's going to be the hero of the Jewish people. The woman comes home and tells her husband, a man of God came to me. She doesn't say angel. A person that was clearly very godly. His appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God. It was kind of what she would imagine an angel might appear like. Very, and here I don't like this translation, very terrible, but the real translation is not terrible, but very scary, awesome, intense. But I asked him from where, not from where he was, neither did he tell me his name. So she doesn't think she spoke to an angel. She thinks she spoke to this very spiritual, eccentric, prophet-like being, almost like an angel. And she says, he told me, behold, thou shalt conceive and bear a son. Now drink no wine, no alcohol, eat no unclean things. Your child will be a Nazir to God from the womb in the day of his death. So she has this strange encounter. She doesn't know what to make of it. She shares it with her husband. And now her husband's like, oh man, we got to figure out, is this legit or is this it's like, a person gets an email and I unfortunately I have a person that who's impoverished and I help him out. We try to make sure he stays, we don't want him to be homeless and we try to help him with food. A person that's down on his luck. But unfortunately, part of his being down on his luck is that he's a little bit naive and he's susceptible to scamming. And so he's the kind of person that someone calls out of the blue and says, hey, remember we met a long time ago? Well, my father is leaving me a will, but I'm not well, and I want you to inherit all my fortune. And all you need to do is send me $365 to pay for the, and or it's kind of like, the email with the prince that wants to, give $1 million. What are these scams? So she doesn't know, did I just meet a legit angel? Or is somebody pulling my leg? Is this a candid camera? She doesn't know. And so the husband, Manoah, prays to God and says, oh, my Lord, if this is real, let the man of God who thou didst send come to us again. Teach us what we should do with a child that's going to be born. Like, I really want to be sure this is legit. I'm not just depriving my wife of alcohol for 9 months if this is not a serious, this is not a serious thing. And so God hears the voice, God listens to Manoah's prayer, and the angel of God comes to the woman as she sat in the field. Her husband's not there. And so the woman says, hey, angel, hold on a second. I got to go call my husband. So she ran, told her husband, and said, the man is here again. Come. And so Manoah arose, went with his wife, meets the man. He says, art thou the man that did speak to the woman? Although, again, this translation, are you the person who spoke to my wife? And he said, I did. I am. And so Manoah said, let thy words come to pass. Assuming we have a child, what shall be the rule for the child and what shall be done with him? Can you repeat the rules again? That fine print, tell me again. And the angel said to Manoah, of all that I said to the woman, let her take heed. Meaning she should keep the rules I told her already. She should eat nothing of grapes, any wine, alcohol, or eat anything unclean. Everything that I've commanded, let her observe. So Manoah tells the angel, please, I pray, let us honor you with a goat, with a kid. And what he means to say is, let's have a meal. Let's celebrate, thinking this is a prophet of God. He says, you can't go until I serve you. I want to thank you for your graciousness. You're probably very hungry. So the angel says, though thou detain me, I will not eat thy bread. You're going to try to keep me here. I can't eat your food. If thou wilt offer a burnt offering, thou must offer it to the Lord. And he says, if you want to bring the goat instead of as a delicious meal, as an offering, well, you don't worship me. I'm an angel. You got to send it to God. Manoah knew not that he was an angel of the Lord. This is an important line. So Manoah didn't realize he was talking to an angel. Could you imagine having a whole prolonged conversation? You think you're just talking to your neighbor. You find out he's an angel. So Manoah said of the angel, what is thy name? That when thy sayings come to pass, we may do thee honor. He still doesn't get that it's an angel. He says, I want to honor you when it comes true. So the angel says to him, why asketh thou thus after my name? Why do you want to know my name? It's secret. Top secret. You're not clear. You don't have the classification to know my name. So Manoah took the kid with a meal offering. Instead of giving it as a meal, he can't offer the guy food. He offers it on the rock to the Lord. And the angel did wondrously. And Manoah and his wife looked on. What was wondrous? When it came to pass, a flame went down towards heaven from the altar. The flame went up. And the angel ascended in the flame. And he disappeared in a flash. And Manoah and his wife looked on, and they fell on their faces to the ground. They were utterly shocked. The man they were talking to was not a man at all. He wasn't an eccentric human. This was an angel who took on temporarily the visage, the appearance of a human being, and then in a flash lost those human trappings and becomes once again an angel. And the angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife. And when the angel disappeared just like that, Manoah knew this was no human. He was an angel of the Lord. Lynn, you're muted. We want to hear your voice.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I have a question to ask. This
Sure.
may sound ridiculous, but
Never ridiculous.
is it possible that this angel is the father of the child? Is it possible that that could have happened?
That is certainly not the premise of this text. The premise of the story as it's presented here is, you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
The premise here is that this is an angel
Mhm.
who is delivering the good word from God, that if they behave properly, they're going to be worthy of having a child. I don't think that is.
Okay, so it wasn't that the angel had anything to do
No.
with them conceiving or anything
No.
like
The angel was just giving a message from God that if they act appropriately, Shabbai.
Okay, got it.
Feel this weather. This is the reason why we live in Florida. So imagine what a life-altering moment that must have been to go from being a regular, maybe not a regular person, maybe they were special people, but it wasn't an everyday occurrence to meet angels, and they get to meet the angel. That must have been a massive shock and a big moment. And so they're flipping out, because all this time they're like suspicious. What's the real deal? Who is this guy? What's he about? Where is he from? And all of a sudden, boom, he's an angel. Manoah said to his wife, we'll surely die. We've seen, and in this translation says God, but that's not the right translation. We've seen a divine being.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen an angel of God. How can one survive such a mind-blowing, literally, experience?
Mm-hmm.
But as usual, his wife brought some common sense and grounding Manoah. His wife said to him, you think God wants to kill us? If God wanted to kill us, he wouldn't have received our burnt offering from our hands. He wouldn't have shown us all these wonders or told us we're going to have a child if God just simply wants to play with us. And so ultimately, the promise, the prophecy, the assurance of the angel comes to pass. The woman bore a son, and she called him Shimshon. In Hebrew, the name is Shimshon. In English, we say Samson.
Samson.
And the Lord blessed this child. This was some special child.
My brother's Hebrew name.
Your brother's name is Shimshon? And the Spirit of the Lord began to flicker within him in the region of Machane Dan, which is where they lived, between Zorah and Eshtaol, between the two mountains of Zorah and Eshtaol. So this child from birth. His existence is all about miracles. An angel gives the message. God intervenes with a great miracle. This child, the parents know, is going to be a savior character
Right.
to the Jewish people. And he starts being of the Spirit. Okay, that is the story. That's the origin story. Does this sound like something maybe out of a superhero, a comic, a hero, kind of comic
Like
book?
a fairy tale.
Something that's hard to fathom. But most of the authors of the original, how do you call it? Marvel and what's the other franchises called? Most of the early writers were Jewish. And there's many theories that they took a lot of inspiration from the stories of the Bible. All right, so we just finished, Joy, we just finished chapter 13, which is the story of the promise of a child to be born, the conditions and the miraculous events of encountering an angel, and ultimately having this child born. I did just before we go on in the narrative, I had the privilege, a sad privilege, but today I was called to visit a woman who was in her final days in hospice, and the daughters reached out to me and they told me that their mother was originally from Russia. Her parents moved to France to escape. Her parents were involved in the Mensheviks and they needed to escape the internal turmoil of what was going on of the Bolsheviks. And so they escaped to Paris and they were part of the Paris intellectual, society. And then the Nazis come to power, and she was 10 years old. This must have been in 1934. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that makes sense. It may have been a little later.
No, how old is
She was born in 24, I believe. So
1924?
So 34. So maybe she was a little older, but she told me, she wasn't able to communicate. Her daughter told me that her parents didn't tell her that she was Jewish. And so she only learned of her Jewish identity at the age of 10, when the parents skipped town in the middle of the night to avoid the wave of persecution. And so at 10 years old, she discovers she's Jewish. And the context of her Jewishness is she needs to run for her life. And so they ended up moving to Morocco, because you can go from France to Morocco, and they lived in Morocco. And then she came to America. And they told me she never, this is actually something for our anti-Semitism discussion as well, which is going to be tomorrow night. So she never really lived as a Jew, but she paid a true price for being Jewish. And her Jewishness was a central facet of her story, although she never lived actively Jewish, because she was always paying the price for her Jewishness. And she lived to build she lived from those disadvantages to build a wonderful family and a life. And it just makes me think, just makes you think. Also, I guess my point was a child born, and everyone that's born, every child in the moment of birth is destined to be something special. They are destined to be the main character of their own life story, right? We're all the main character of our story. And
Hashem might have a different book than.
Well, look, and all of us, our story is significant. And God makes us have the perspective of being the center of our universe, because we are so important. And we are the center of God's universe, because God created us to do something special and distinct. But Shimshon, his life story is not just a private central role, but he is going to take a central role for a period of time, the story of the Jewish people. And that's something that is remarkable. And so let's see about Shimshon's story. Now, Shimshon, like everyone in this planet, and everyone that comes to be born, life is never straight and black and white. Life is full of questions and challenges and struggles and doubt. And so let's see the story of Shimshon's childhood and how he emerges to be a great person for the Jewish people. Shimshon is beginning to find divine inspiration, and he's a young man. And Shimshon went down to Timnah, and he saw a woman from Timnah, a Philistine maiden, a daughter of the Philistines. He came up and told his father and his mother, and he says, I've seen a woman in Timnah, a Philistine woman, please arrange her hand in marriage. I want to marry her. The father and mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of thy brethren? There's no Jewish people to marry, or among all my people that you have to go take as a wife, someone from our enemies, the Philistines? So Shimshon says, no, Dad, you need to get her for me. She pleases me well. His father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord that he sought a pretext against the Philistines, for at the time the Pelishtim had dominion over Israel. So there's a very unique and distinct story where it seems like Hashem is setting up Shimshon to tread his own course so as to be able to be uniquely present to protect the Jewish people against the Philistines. And so even in those days, as you can tell from the tension between the parents, should marry someone of their own background. That's ideal. Certainly from the Jewish perspective, it's encouraged that a Jew should marry another Jewish person. Now, granted, this girl who he's going to marry converts to Judaism, but nonetheless, she maintains ties with her original family, which is going to be a central aspect of the story as it unfolds. And although it was very uncommon for a person to convert from the dominant Philistine tribe and join the Jewish people, Hashem is orchestrating this to allow what happens next to happen next. So then Shimshon went down and his father and his mother to Timnah, and he came to the vineyard of Timnah, and behold, a young lion roared against him. He's being attacked by a lion. By the way, Lynn, you've been to Israel? Joy, have you ever been to Israel?
Yes, I have.
Did you ever see a wild lion when you were in Israel?
No.
No. There are no wild lions. There are no wild lions in Israel. But if you go to Wikipedia after our discussion and look at the story of lions, there once were lions prevalent in the Middle East and in Israel. And unfortunately, they've gone more or less extinct from Israel. But archaeological finds show that there were lions once present in Israel. And so Samson is attacked by a lion. And under this attack, Samson has his first episode, a heroic, supernatural episode. The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. He tore him as he would have torn a child. And Samson is being attacked by a lion, usually human versus lion. Unless you have certain types of hardware, you're not getting out of that encounter. And Samson, with his hands alone, tore up the lion.
Wow.
And he had no weapon. He had nothing in his hand. And so this is the first trigger of the supernatural strength, this might. By the way, if you've ever heard, we talk about Samson's might. And he told not his father or his mother what he had done. He didn't tell anybody that he had this crazy episode of strength. Which again, this is consistent with the fact that Samson is going to be the great superhero, protector, the defender of the people of Israel and the Jewish way. And after a time, so he went back and he talked with the same woman. He has a crush on this Philistinian girl, and she pleased Shimshon well. He really, really wants her. And after a time, he returned to take her. So he comes back to seek her hand in marriage again. And he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and he sees the lion that he tore apart. And behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of a lion. Inside, I know this may not be the most appetizing part of the story, but within the carcass of the lion, a beehive.
I have to ask a question.
Yes. Lynn, go ahead.
I need to ask one question, because was Samson a very large man? Was he like, because in the movies, that's how they portray him, as a very big man.
Thus far, there's no evidence in the text that he was a giant in size.
Right.
He was a average sized man that
Average size. Okay.
a really heavy punch. So he may have even been in the lightweight category, but he was able to wrestle with even the
Okay.
So Samson, again, he's a young man. He's still discovering his strength. He's still figuring out who he is. He's still figuring out his place in the world. And he scrapes out the honey with his hands. And he went on his way, munching on the honey. And he came to his father and mother, and he offered them honey, but they didn't eat. Why wouldn't they eat it? I don't know. He gave them, they didn't eat, but he told them not that he had taken the honey from the carcass of a lion. He didn't tell them where he got it from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting. So his father went down to this woman. Basically, his father goes to negotiate and to arrange that they should get married. And Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. They had a wedding or an engagement party. And it came to pass, when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. So basically, Samson is going to get married.
Yeah, but
They-
I have a question. Why
Yes.
would they accept this? Why would the Philistines welcome him? This is a Jew.
Why would they let her convert? Why would
How does that,
Joel's
in
family-
other words, that he's welcomed with the Philistines? Wouldn't the Philistines reject him?
You're asking a very good question. I don't know.
He's an enemy.
I don't know why they accepted him. Maybe he was a good-looking guy. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a good
Did
question.
he do anything to win her over? with
So
them?
I'll tell you
I
this.
mean, even Jacob had to
The
do things with
text-
Laban.
The text here doesn't give us a lot of information. We kind of have to read between the lines that there was more to the story than just Samson saw a girl, liked her, and said, Dad, I want to get married. There must have been a courtship involved and a relationship, and there must have been, as a matter of fact, the Talmud describes how she converted to become Jewish in order to have this marriage happen. And so we
Yeah,
got to assume that there were additional steps that, while very important in isolation, it's not necessarily pertinent to the broader narrative of
This
Yes,
was
but
supported by the Philistines.
Would the Philistines have wanted that? I mean, that she converted? Did she convert?
So then I'll tell you what. What we're going to find out is that it's not so
Before she-
clear that they actually had innocent intentions. We're going to find out that there was tension, and maybe they were using this as a pretext to get into to have some trouble with the Jewish people. Because we're going to see it wasn't all so straightforward from here. So let's see. At this point, everyone's playing along. Samson wants to get married legitimately. His parents, though not very excited about it, arrange that she should convert, formally become Jewish, and then they go back to her household, and they're arranging to have a wedding party. And there's 30 young men that become part of the... And so Samson tells them, I will now propound the riddle to you. I'm going to tell you all the riddle. If you can figure it out within the 7 days of the feast, I'll give you 30 sheets and 30 garments. Because I'm going to give you guys, again, today, if you're going to offer someone a set of linen, they're not going to be all that impressed. If you offer someone some clothing, that's also, I mean, depending what the clothing is, it's not necessarily all that impressive. But in those days, bedding was a high value commodity, and so was clothing. And so he says, I'm going to pose a riddle. If you get the riddle, I'm going to give each of you these two very prized and valuable possessions, sheets and clothing. But if you cannot figure it out, then you should give me 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. Some of the other details that seem like a riddle to us in the Bible. So he said, Nu, Zog Shoin, tell us the riddle. And so he says to them, out of the eater came forth food. Out of the strong came forth sweetness. They could not figure out the riddle for 3 days. And on the 7th day, these are Philistine guys, 30 Philistine guys. They ask Samson's wife, entice him so that he will tell us the riddle. And if you don't give us what we want, we'll burn you and your father's house. Because if you don't help us, you're going to be culpable for us losing our possessions to Samson. So we could see what kind of friends they were. This
Right,
sounds,
good.
they're threatening her life unless she gives up the riddle. And we can also see in Samson a certain youthful immaturity, let's say, to be taunting and getting into these kind of troubles. So Samson's wife wept before him and said, "Thou dost but hate me and loves me not." You don't love me. You've given a riddle to my people, but you didn't tell it to me. So she doesn't say, I'm under pressure. She just says, you got to tell me the riddle. And he said to her, I haven't told this riddle to anyone. You want me to tell it to you? She kept on nudging him and badgering him throughout the feast. And on the seventh day, he told her because she was harassing her. And she told the people the riddle. So she got her husband in big trouble now because no one was going to figure out the riddle. But she gave it away.
Now he owes them.
She spilled the beans on her husband, and now her husband owes these high value commodities, and most likely Samson didn't have them.
Oh dear.
What a rocky way to
But
start a
she
marriage.
betrayed him. She betrayed him.
She betrayed her husband.
Mm-hmm.
What a rocky way to start a marriage.
Oy.
The men of the city said to him on the seventh day before the sun then went down, you know what? You know what's sweeter than honey? You know what's stronger than a lion? And they gave him the answer.
What's that?
What is the answer?
What's the answer?
I think it's the story. It's the story of how he.
What's the riddle? What was the answer to the
Let's
riddle?
go back to the riddle. Let's go back to the riddle.
Like a vault.
The riddle was,
Something about sweetness of honey.
out of the eater came food, out of the strong came sweetness.
Yeah.
And so they answered in a poetic way that the lion, out of the eater came honey, because he was telling the story about how honey grew in the lion.
Oh,
so-
it was about the lion.
Out
Okay.
of the strong, from the lion,
came the
came
honey.
the honey.
Okay. Yeah.
So out of the eater, the lion that eats, came forth food. In Hebrew, the riddle works better.
Mhm.
Meha ochel came machal. Meha yatsa matzok. It's like basically from the eater came food, and this is the honey that came from the lion. So
Mhm.
he spilled the beans to his new wife, and
Mm.
she told the men, and they told her, what is sweeter? It's honey and a lion. And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, if you would not have messed with my wife, you would have not found out my riddle. And now we're going to see another episode. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, which Ashkelon was the center of Philistine life, and slew these 30 guys.
Wow.
He took their clothing. No, actually, it's even worse. He killed 30 people, took their clothing, and gave their garments to the people who wanted the riddle. His anger burnt, and he went back home.
People who wanted what? Who did he give
Oh,
them?
so he killed other people and gave them their clothing to satisfy the other people. But it
Yeah.
gets confusing because it's 30 people and 30 people.
Yeah,
So-
this is a rough story. And what justification is there to take the life of these
Other people.
30 people?
Not the, what about, not
But
the
why
ones
would
who
they
killed?
use 30? Because 30, that was supposed to find out about the riddle, and now they say well, I guess he had to give 30
So he
garments,
flipped out.
30 sets of garments. Okay.
Ah,
Yeah,
yeah.
get it. I get what he did. Okay.
And so he's really angry, and he ultimately uncovers that not only did they get the riddle from him, but she was unfaithful to her husband and intimate with these Philistinian guys.
He's intimate with-
Well, wait a minute. Wait, where does it say that?
He says poetically that basically the way you were able to get this out of her is because you were really lovers with her, or something to that effect.
They threatened her life.
Yeah. So anyways, long story short, Shimshon's wife ends up with his companion.
This is
He ends
very
up he ends up with one of the other Philistine guys.
okay.
So this is a rough story, a hard way to start your career.
So the wife ends up with one of his companions, not with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
With a
One of the
Philistine
guys,
lover?
the guy who got the secret riddle, one of them ends up being with her. And it seems like there was already infidelity going on in that marriage. So what a rough way to start a marriage.
Oy, is this Delilah? Are
No.
we're not talking about
We're going to talk about Delilah, but probably next week.
Delilah.
So now you understand that there's this
Okay.
unique trauma.
Who are we talking about? What was her name?
What's the name of
Yeah.
this wife?
We didn't get a name. She isn't named over here.
Okay. She's
First
named.
wife.
She's
Yeah, so
not
it's-
named?
She is not named. So it seems like there's somewhat of a divine setup where Shimshon falls in love with this girl who's no good, which leads to really big friction in the marriage. And it also sobers Samson to the dynamic that exists between the Jewish people and the Philistines. And so if I had to have a theory, how are the Philistines so comfortable messing with Samson? Because they didn't really view him as a full-fledged human. He was an object to have fun with. So yeah, you want to get married? Marry. And then they have all of this. Now, granted, Samson's own youthful immaturity may have triggered this, but this is going to set the stage for Samson, who in a more mature state realizes that the Philistines are really a big problem for the Jewish people. So it starts with this kind of harassment, but it only escalates.
I thought you said though Hashem wanted to make this arrangement to allow.
Hashem wanted this arrangement to create this dynamic, which is ultimately going to empower and put Samson in a role that's going to avenge.
Okay, Rabbi, this paragraph, could you please interpret it? Because I'm confused with it. It starts, but it came to pass. Did you read that paragraph? It's very
So basically, Samson, they're getting married. In the first 7 days of marriage, there's this big traumatic event. He storms off. She ends up with somebody else. But Samson still wants to rekindle this relationship.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Came to pass after a while, in the time of the wheat harvest, Samson tries to visit his wife. They're not divorced, with a gift of a goat. And he says,
Why would he do that if she betrayed him? I mean, that's crazy.
that's a question that we can ask a lot of people.
What was it? What was the question?
He asked, why would he go back to her if she betrayed him?
Yeah, right.
That's a good question. Unfortunately, there are many people that it takes time to realize that there's betrayal in their life, or to really come to terms. And he says, I want to go visit my wife in her chamber. But her father, Philistine father, would not let him go in. Her father said, I thought that you hate her. I gave her away to your companion. But if you want, she's got an even prettier younger sister. You could take her instead.
Yeah.
What a gross, crass
Oh my God.
way of.
It sounds a little like Laban and
Yeah.
Jacob. Take the sister.
So now Samson says, with the way you've treated me, I'll be blameless when I take my revenge. So I'm going to do them mischief. And so now Samson realizes the extent of the ill will and the hatred that exists between the Philistines and the Jewish people. And Samson says, I'm going to make you guys pay. And so Samson, let's see what happens next. I know this is a wild story. Samson went and caught 300 foxes. He took torches and it turns tail to tail and put a torch in the midst of the two tails. So he ties the fox's tails together and has a torch in between the tails. And so I guess what happens is when you have two foxes fighting against each other, it ends up being chaotic and they can't run far and they end up stumbling. And he had set the torches on fire and he led them into the standing grain of the Philistines. And he burnt up their crops, as well as the already harvested corn and the olives.
That's terrible.
So he's getting revenge against his father-in-law and their clan. And the Plishtim said, who's done this? And everyone answered, oh, this is Samson, the son-in-law of the guy from Timnah, because he had taken his wife and given her. And everybody knew this was his revenge for the father taking his wife and giving her away to somebody else.
Right.
And the Plishtim went up and burnt her and her father with fire. And so the Philistines, in a cruel and horrific reaction, instead of fighting back with Samson, they blame the father for abusing him, and they tragically burn his wife.
So are they burning? Wait, I'm confused. Whose father?
Samson takes
burning?
revenge against the Philistines by burning down their crops.
Right, that I understand.
And the Philistines, out of anger to the father and his daughter, Samson's ex-wife,
Yeah.
for causing this mishap by
Okay.
being dishonorable, the Philistines, end up burning down the estate and killing the father
They
and
didn't
daughter.
capture Samson.
But they're burning their own.
Correct.
Yeah.
They're burning their own.
No, it's funny.
This is one crazy story.
Father and daughter? Or
Father and daughter. They blame the father
They
for.
never captured Samson.
Hold on. There's a long Samson. We're just getting started. This is just the first. This is just the opening scene.
We know, end of the story.
Now Samson's mad again. They killed his wife. And so Samson says to them, this is what you've done. I'm going to take revenge against you guys. And then I'm going to call a ceasefire. Then we're over. And so he starts attacking the Philistines who killed his ex-wife, his estranged wife, and his estranged father-in-law. And he smote them hip and thigh with great slaughter.
Wait 1 minute. Does he attack them single-handedly?
So it seems like Samson is this incredibly strong and mighty person, and he single-handedly takes on this local clan of Philistines who murdered his wife and father-in-law, who he himself attacked because of their betrayal. And so this is some wild story. And he smote them in a great slaughter. He went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock of Etam. So this is some story. And then the Philistines now want to attack back because they've been attacked by a Jew. And so they start fighting with Judah, tribe of Judah. And they camp themselves in a place called Lehi. And so the Judah people say, hey, what's going on, guys? How are you? Why are you? We didn't do anything to you. And they answered, we've come because we want to get Samson, because he's really hurt us. And so now the Judah people come and say, hey, Samson, you're making us trouble. You're waging this own private vendetta, this private war against the Philistines. Well, we're going to end up paying the price. Don't you know that the Philistines have the upper hand? So 3,000 men of Judah go to the rock in Etam where Samson's hanging out, and they say, hey, don't you know that the Philistines are the bosses? They're the dominant ones here. What are you doing? And he said, all I'm doing is getting them back for what they did to me. And so the people of Judah say, hey, Samson, 1 second. We're going to have to bind you and deliver you to the Philistines because otherwise they're going to kill all of us. So Samson says, swear to me that you're not going to try to kill me yourself. I'll let you bind me. I'll let you take me into custody, but only if you're not going to try to kill me. And he says, don't worry, we're not going to kill you, but we are going to tie you up and we're going to give you over to the Philistines.
Aye.
But we're not going to kill you. And so they bound him up and they brought him to the Philistines.
So it's the Jews doing something to a Jew.
So it's the Jews telling Samson, listen, you're a liability. We don't want to do anything against you, but on the other hand, we need to save our families. We don't deliver you to the Philistines, our wives and children are in trouble. So let us deliver you to the Philistines. And Samson, a real gentleman, says, Gesundheit, go ahead. Bind me, just don't you kill me. They say, oh, we're not going to kill you. We're just going to deliver you to the Philistines.
Why would he accept that?
Because Samson's going to use this opportunity to do another ambush.
But Samson is strong. He might have thought that he could get away from the Philistines.
Not only does he think he can, but that's what he does.
Yeah.
Samson is on a vendetta, and every time that he tries to wind it down, things escalate, and it becomes an even bigger trouble. And so we're going to stop over here. But long story short, Samson is taken into Philistine custody, and then he attacks them into custody, because really he was pretending that he was well bound, but he just breaks out like nothing and attacks them. So okay, we'll read this last verse.
Fight against hardware they might have, spears.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they were more primitive. Maybe these were, I don't know.
Maybe
And so
they
he-
bounced off him because he had such
Maybe. So he comes to Lehi, and the Philistines
strength.
shout it. The Philistines are really mad at him. And as they're attacking him, he has another, I'm calling it an episode. That's probably not a respectful way, but he has this another moment of inspiration and his great strength. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. And the cords that were on his arms became as soft as flax, was burnt with fire. He breaks off his shackles.
Sorry
he-
about this.
He needs a weapon. So he finds a jawbone of an ass. He puts it in his hand, and with just a jawbone, he slaughters. It's like the bone from the skull of a donkey.
Uh-huh.
And he uses it as a weapon. And at the end of the day, he slaughters close to 1,000 people.
That's good.
And Samson says, with the jawbone of an ass, heaps and heaps, the jawbone of an ass, I've slain my men. What I understand is Samson doesn't even know what to make of his own. He's still figuring himself. He's still discovering his strength. He doesn't know what to make of this.
Most superheroes don't.
Right.
Really.
He's still discovering and figuring out his superpowers. And it came to pass, as he was done, he cast away the jawbone, and he called that place Ramot Lehi, the heights of the jawbone. And so he names it the place where the jawbone story happened. Jawbone Hill. So my dear friends, it's a wild story. We barely started. But this is the first 2 chapters, chapter 14 and 15 in the book of Judges, the story of Samson, his miraculous birth, which is predicted by an angel and promised that he's going to be a savior. His unconventional start with the marriage to a Philistine woman who she betrays him. The Philistines betray him, and the Philistines pay a heavy price. You don't want to mess with a superhero, especially when they're just discovering their superpowers. And that's what happens over here. My dear friends, next week we'll continue with the 2nd chapter in the story of Samson, and a story that has highs and lows. But ultimately, Samson is going to get the credit for freeing the Jewish people of their oppressive Philistine neighbors. Thank you.
Do we know of any other
Superhero?
superhero in Judaism history?
I gotta give that question some thought. Samson is a
Never
unique
heard
story.
of anybody like this. Not in 5 books.
You know, give me one second. There's a
Didn't David?
David and Goliath.
I want to play you again. It's really a little bit off topic, but hang on. There's a song from a Jewish band. I've played some of the music in other classes. A song called "Give It All You Got," and if you'll see their model, their instance. Oh, where's the music video? You'll see their example of strength is Samson.
Your troubles.
No. Here we go. Lynn and Joy, can you hear this?
The performance was
In a few seconds.
How come I don't hear it?
You don't hear it?
After
Do you hear the sound or not?
No,
Okay, hang on one second.
no,
I just got-
hear you, but I don't hear the music.
Hang on. I got it. It's
But
a
I don't
setting.
hear it. I hear you.
Oh,
Hang on. Optimize, share sound. Tell me if you hear it now.
No.
You hear it?
Yes.
I don't hear it now.
That's weird.
I don't.
I don't hear it. I don't hear it.
All right, hold on one
I
second.
don't.
I'm stopping
I
the
can
share,
hear it.
Uh-oh.
and now
I
I'm going to
don't
share it
see it.
again. Okay, I see. Hold on. Don't go anywhere. Do you see the screen now?
Yes.
Can you hear that?
Oh, I hear it. Whoops.
After 125 years, you go up to heaven, you climb all those stairs. They won't ask you were you wise like Solomon. They won't ask you were you strong like Samson. They'll ask just one question and you give just one answer. It's the end of the game and only one thing matters. They'll say, did you give it all you got? 'Cause in this life you only have what you got. So give it all you got. In this world we only have what we got. So give it all you got. If you say it's easy, I'll say it's not. You gotta give it all you got. And if you say it's not for you, I'll say it's your lot. You gotta give it all you got. And if you say you're tired, I'll say tick tock. You gotta give it all you got. And you could put my album on a shelf to rot. Just give it all you got. So hard and wiping those tears. You look in the mirror, you face all your fears. Don't be a fool trying to be wise like Solomon. Only the weak try to be strong like Samson. Oh no, oh no. I did what I said, I got no one to blame. Only one thing matters at the end of the game. They'll say, did you give it all you got?
Anyways, there you go. Cute song.
Love it.
And is you don't have
Very
to
good.
you don't have to be wise like Solomon, strong like Samson. We just gotta give our own gift and optimize our own potential. But there, the example is the superhero is Samson. And so
Was King David ever thought that way?
there are many heroes, there are many unique people. But as far as sheer
Strength,
brute strength,
right.
Samson is the ultimate in the Bible.
One, okay, yeah.
Well, all right,
Amazing.
Lynn, let's be in touch. Let me see if we can find somebody to help you with that. And everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, good, good.
Hopefully we'll see whoever's able to next week,
Yeah.
either on Zoom or in
Yeah,
person.
outdoors is great.
Okay.
I'd encourage you to come outdoors.
Take care.
Oh,
Very good. Thank you,
You will.
Rabbi.
Thank
I
you.
know. Yeah.
Everyone
shalom.
take
Yeah,
care.
Have a
it's
good
beautiful
week.
football
Bye, Lynn.
season.
Yeah.
Really got a football